Hello, and welcome to Hillbilly Cat History, where we've been following our fictional Elvis fan Joyce as she tries to unravel the mystery of August 16th, 1977. It's August 17th, 1977. A lot has gone on today. Joyce has seen a whole lot of newspaper articles. The day before, she saw a lot of television, a news broadcast. She also listened to the radio. Today, she went over to Graceland, where many people were gathering, what the news later reported to be at least 70,000 people. And a third of those people made it all the way through Graceland, and they were able to view Elvis. So that's over 22,000 people that went through in less than 3 hours. It was kind of amazing. Joyce and her friends have made it back to her house, which is just a few blocks away from Graceland, and they've been watching the evening news, some of which consist of a press conference with Sonny West and Dave Hebler. And that's where we last left off, right in the middle, because we didn't have time to get through it all. So we're going to finish it today. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for coming. I definitely appreciate your support and always being here to see what we've got up for today. Hi, John. Thank you so much for coming. Appreciate having you here too. Let's get right into it so that we can finish out this amusing but at the time devastating broadcast of this TV conference.
Talk to him. What would you tell him if you could talk to him?
I would tell him, Steve. Well, I can't say what I'd tell him. No, it would be curse words. I mean, I would call him a name, and I said, "What are you doing, man? Who are you? You were someone we told a story to, and you're going up there and blasting into him like that and saying the whole thing's about drugs. It's not. There's love and admiration in there.
Is the book a misrepresentation?
Not at all. It's fact. It is true."
Well, where is the sensationalism, then?
The drugs thing that he keeps trying to bring up as the main thing, and it's not.
Keeps
So here we see Sonny say that Steve Dunleavy has sensationalized the drugs, that the drugs weren't as bad as Steve's making them out to be. Now, Sonny talked about this for many years, and I don't think that that's the opinion he went forward with, because he often stated that, and they're stating right now, that they believed Elvis was going to die from these drugs. So I don't know how much Steve could have been overstating it. Could it have been sensationalized if these three people who had spent so much time with Elvis were saying, hey, it's going to kill him. He's so far into this, it's going to kill him. I don't think it's sensationalism then to print a book about that highlights that, especially if your goal is to stop Elvis Presley from doing these drugs. But here Sonny's saying that a lot of that's not true, that there was a lot of really good stuff that they told him that didn't end up in the book, or that was overshadowed in the book by the sensationalism. But it doesn't really fit together. It's not a consistent statement.
Things are mentioned in there minutely. If you read it, you'll see. But he went up there and could watch this man being embalmed, that was alive and well that day or something before, and I couldn't do that. But
So this broadcast, like the video quality, it's been cut up at some point. And there's glitches in it, and you probably just heard that glitch. Something got skipped over. But they're talking about how Elvis would go to the Memphis funeral home, and he would look at people who had been embalmed. And of course, that person was alive that day, because that's kind of how the thing works. You die, and they bring you over and they embalm you that day or the next day. It's got to be pretty fast. Otherwise, nature takes its course and things become to the point where you can't have these open casket funerals. So, there's a profession that does this, and Elvis was interested in that profession, and I believe he was wrestling with thoughts of his mortality. Plus, he's awake in the middle of the night, and there's not a lot of places that are open in the middle of the night, but these guys at the mortuary seem to be happy to, have him there and show him around, show him what they were doing. And I bet they didn't get a whole lot of interest like that, especially from someone of Elvis's stature. So it had to have been feeling really good for them. But they've made it into this very, very weird thing, or at least Steve Dunleavy has. And now Sonny's trying to walk that back a little bit because, of course, he was right there in the funeral home too. And he was probably just as interested in what was going on. And John saying that Elvis would go to the funeral home and look around, and Sonny admitted Elvis wondered about death. Right, it's a natural thing at any age, but especially as you begin to approach your 40s and get into them, especially if you have kids, especially if somebody's asking you about a will, and there's a lot that's made about a will at this time. Did he have a will? Did he not have a will? Why weren't these people in it? Why were those people in it? We're going to get to some looking at that. And if we don't get to it in this series, we're definitely getting into it in my contract series, because there were contractual reasons that Elvis was required to file a will on a periodic basis. So a will wasn't really like a statement of what Elvis believed would happen when he died. It was more of, hey, we have to file this paperwork immediately to go on this tour. Do you want to rubber stamp this and move forward with our standard boiler script plate? And so I have thoughts about how that works, and some things to show that would go with that I think you guys would really find interesting. But to get back to this, Sonny's trying to say that, if you've had these thoughts and you just happen to have the access to get in to see these things, and you wouldn't necessarily have had to have been a superstar to do that. I think you could go down to any locally owned mortuary and just start talking to the guy. He'd probably be happy to show you around how everything works, because they don't get a lot of interest in that back business side of it. And it's lonely, I'm sure. And that's Elvis had an interest in that, and he befriended some of these guys and talked his way through it. So, and Sonny understands it's not as weird as he made it out to be. It's just something eccentric that Elvis did.
He was fat. It wasn't a thing of where he was an old type of killing and things with their hands. He was into all of these things. It wasn't just with death. He was curious about everything in life. He really was.
It wasn't. Are you going morbid?
Why are you here? We have been told by someone that his father doesn't want us there.
And do you think Dunleavy's a phony now after all this?
I think that what I saw today was phony from the guy that I met a year ago. Yes, I do.
I think it's a phony.
Dave, you seem to be implying before that you were writing the book in part to try and get Elvis to change his ways. Is that right?
You bet. That was one of the reasons. There were a number of reasons for writing the book. Number one, we felt that the manner in which we were discharged wasn't right. I mean, any employer has the inalienable right to fire any employee. No question about that at all. But nobody has a right to treat you like a piece of garbage. Nobody. And
So we watched this clip yesterday, and I'm kind of rewatching this to get us back to where we were, and to allow some viewers to come in as we get into this episode. But I don't believe he was treated as garbage. Earlier, if you watch yesterday's clips, they said that they got 3 weeks of pay, or 3 weeks notice, which I'm interpreting as at least 3 weeks of pay. So they got something, and we could argue about whether it was enough or not enough, but that's not being treated like garbage. There was thought given to what would happen to them. And Elvis did call later in that famous recorded call, which I believe Terry just put up on his website or on his channel. So if you guys want to check that out. And I believe that was Elvis, trying to check on him, trying to open some kind of doorway. It didn't work out. But I don't think they were treated like garbage. And if you guys think they were, or you think they weren't, put that in the comments, or show it in the comments later after the video is up, so that we can all, know whether we think that Elvis and Vernon treated these people like garbage, or whether this was just a bad employer-employee breakup, the kind that happens every day throughout the country.
to continue with that is again, to reiterate what we said earlier a couple of times, we wanted to point out to him, what he was doing, not only to himself but to the people around him, and we didn't want him to be what he was. We wanted him to be what we knew he could be and had been. Again, and
I did not want him to be what he was. Now, he surrounds that with phrases like what he could be and what he had been. So there was some kind of change in Elvis, and whatever that change was, or they perceived a change. So either Elvis changed in a way that grew beyond them, or grew more into himself and excluded them, as you might have happened if he was heavily into these drugs. Or he just grew away from them and apart, and that part's not clear, other than that there came a time where there had to be a break. So we don't know exactly what happened, but my feeling is that these guys knew that it was coming and they weren't surprised by it. But let's hear what else Dave has to say.
thirdly, we wanted to, my God, we had families, and we're sitting out in the streets, and what are we going to do? Be 40-year-old stuntmen? Or
I wanted to add one thing to that. See, that's what I mean. A certain individual took the quote thing from me in the front page about maybe it will do some good. He didn't know what it means. He says, what does it mean it'll do some good? If he had read the book, he would have found in there that we were trying to present him with a challenge. Because if he looked back and saw all these things roll in front of him and know that they were true, I don't know how he might have dismissed them in his mind as the years went by. Well, it wasn't like, but when he saw it the way that it happened, like anyone else, when you read something about your former life or anything that you've done years ago, the reality of it is in front of you. It's not something you can, how it was. And that's what I meant when I said maybe it will do some good for him, for the drug culture, for people to realize no one is out of reach of drugs, man. Here is a man that had it in the palm of his hand and started off with it that way, and the drugs took it away from him.
Now, what Sonny's talking about here is he's made statements, and they were fairly clear statements, and the press ran with them as the fairly clear statements that they were. And now Sonny feels like maybe they weren't taken the way he meant them, and that you really had to read the book in order to understand his full thoughts. Well, I don't really understand how that works either. He didn't write the book. Steve Dunleavy wrote the book, and Sonny's already told us that it does not reflect what he believes about Elvis Presley. So I don't know how reading the book would clear that up in any way, any of his statements. So again, he's vacillating back and forth. He's expressing frustration with his inability to cope with the media. He's expressing frustration that nobody really cares enough about what he has to say to read the book, which is just a hard, cold fact of being a writer. That's the way it is. There's a lot more people that will never read your book than do read your book. And that's just the way that it is. But Sonny and Dave believed that they had a story that no one could ignore. And it's slapping them in the face right now. And they can't believe that those who do care aren't really happy with what they've had to say. And the only ones who really seem to support them are the ones who are somehow making some money off of this. But to look over into the comments, Terry's saying that he did not think that Dave was treated as garbage or that the other guys were. And John saying that Billy Smith, who is Elvis's cousin and runs Elvis Fans Matter, another YouTube channel, definitely should check them out. They put out a lot of content, and they tell a lot of sweet Elvis stories over there. But he admitted this, that him and Elvis would talk about the guys, and Elvis would break down and cry and say that what did they do to me? Why did they do this to me? And Elvis told Billy, don't the guys know that I care? So, yes, I have heard that from Billy. And I do believe that that is the way that Elvis felt. And I again, this is a bad family breakup where, like, with your own brother, you can't talk to him and you go for the next 10 years and you haven't said a word to him because of something dumb that happened between you. This is something similar to that, but it's ramped up in emotional intensity because of the number of people involved, because of the public scale of it, because these guys took it into the public. So it just intensified everything to the point where there was no coming back. And Terry saying that he's trashing Elvis about his weight problem, and John saying that Sonny's admitting how he really feels in this interview. And I think that's true. Sonny does not have a mask to put on the way that Elvis would. Elvis has an Elvis public face, and Colonel has a Colonel public face. They don't get away from those faces out in the public. But Sonny, he's bearing it all, and these people are taking it and crucifying him with it over and over and over. And in some, he kind of deserves it in some manner, but he's getting a lot of it. Hi, Nancy. Thank you so much for coming. I really enjoy having you here. I hope you're feeling a lot better. Hi, Jen. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate having you here too. And Jen does not believe that Elvis treated any of them like garbage. So let's listen to what else Dave and them have to say.
Okay, that's it. I'm sorry.
We had to wait, so this is a two-way situation.
Being a contributory factor.
What's your response to that?
Absolute nonsense. How could it possibly have, as a matter of fact, he even stated himself that, he wasn't concerned about the book. And according to people, and you've seen it on the newscast, he's been for the last week, been very happy and looking forward to this upcoming tour.
So here Dave says that Elvis didn't really care if the book was coming out. Didn't really bother him. He said so himself. And yet, I got this picture. Let's see if I can pull my picture up, because it's a very telling picture. So here we've got, this is a publicity photo for the book, Elvis, What Happened? That they're talking about in this press interview, that they're defending why they wrote it. And you can see that they've all got their guns on. They look like their bodyguard selves, that they're presenting as that was their connection to Elvis. They were his bodyguards. That's how they know these stories. Here's the book, Elvis, What Happened? This is what you would have seen on the shelf when you walked into just about anywhere at this point. Probably a lot of drugstores and bookstores and places in the mall, things like that, would have this book sitting out there so that you could, go up and grab it. And we saw in a previous episode where we read part of an article that we're going to try to finish out today, that they had printed an additional 225,000 copies of this book, which they hope to have in the stores by the weekend. So even as this broadcast is going on with the press conference, Ballantine Books is warming up the presses because the president has told them, yes, we need more of these books, the president of Ballantine, and they are printing them off and shipping them all around the country. Now, they'd already printed 400,000, so it certainly seems as if that 400,000 is gone, or close to it. And John saying that if Elvis didn't care, why would he break down and cry? The guy was human, he had feelings. Yeah, so I believe he did say he didn't care. And at the same time, I believe that he broke down and cried. And I believe he cared a lot. I believe he called him and tried to stuff. So this wasn't like a one-day thing and he had, just one reaction. He had a whole series of reactions. And this was a year-long event, because these guys have already said in this interview it's been going on for a year. And like Dave said in the last episode, he was being tortured. Elvis was being tortured. Now, he said it was Elvis that was torturing Elvis, but certainly seems like we could look at the screen and see something that might have tortured him, knowing that this was coming out into the public. And Nancy saying that David, he was only there 2 years. That was just a boss who owned up being rude, but he was just a boss, and that wasn't his friend. I think he's referring to David Stanley, and yeah, I kind of think that's the way David. I think David was very involved in himself at the time, and we'll get to David. Our meeting, Sonny especially was there for Elvis in the beginning, through everything. I mean, to me, Elvis was just his boss. Oh, so Sonny, yeah, Nancy's actually referring to Sonny. Yeah, I don't know. I think they had a very deep relationship, and that they truly did feel like brothers, and that this was a deep family schism. And it really speaks to what they must have, loyalty was number one to Elvis. That was the number one thing. And I have different ways that I could show that to you. But I believe that loyalty was, especially among the inner circle, that's what he looked for. He could forgive everything else. He could forget just about anything else, but he could never forget disloyalty. He could forgive it maybe, but he couldn't let you back into the inner circle. That couldn't happen. And so we see a lot of instances of that throughout his life, and it'd be fascinating to trace a whole bunch of those. But even like his cousin Gene Smith, they had a break at one point, and Gene never really made it back into the inner circle. Now, could have Gene got there? I think maybe he could have, but at the same time, I think he had done something that Elvis had viewed as possibly disloyal. Not that they couldn't have got over that. Now, these three, I think, maybe had done something more. And I think Elvis was changing at the time when he was 42, and he was beginning to think about other things in his life, and that these guys weren't keeping up with that. But to get back into these comments, Jen saying that, Nancy, I agree, he was a true friend. He wasn't around long. And and then Nancy saying, I think it's about, I think she's talking about, Dave Hebler, that he was homeless for a while. And yeah, I believe that's true, that he was homeless through the early 2000s. I've seen him on an interview with Mindy Miller where he was talking about it. So I don't know the exact years or the amount of time, but there was some multi-year period where he was, without an address, really, where he had to move around to people's couches or something, according to what he's saying, or live in cars, or, he got through, and now he's, I believe, having a better financial time of it, but his life has not been roses. And I think he was actually came out much worse than Sonny and Red, who I did have very successful careers and seemed to be able to parlay that into decent retirements, although they both did end up, Sonny got really sick, and so did his wife, and that in our society sucks all your money. It doesn't matter how much money you have. He could have had Elvis's wealth, and he would have lost it all at the end. And I think Red was kind of in a similar situation, but again, I'm talking about stuff I don't know. So let me get back to what I do know. Let's look at this other picture. This is why I got off on this tangent in the first place, is they're holding this paper right here that says Elvis fights to ban the book that tells all. So we just heard Dave say in the interview that Elvis didn't really care. He didn't mind if it was printed, and yet they're holding a newspaper that they're working with that they're now saying is, trash and garbage. But it's saying that Elvis does care, and these guys all posed for this picture. Now, this was some time ago, because you can see that Sonny's hair is radically different than it is in this interview, and so is Dave's, really. But let's go back to the interview and pick it up where we left off.
Sonny, did his depression ever lead him to be suicidal at all?
No,
that was
too
never,
strong a person.
No,
never.
I do think that his death will affect you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you know how much the book is sold?
We have no idea.
It just was released.
We have no idea, and we don't care.
So that's interesting that they pop right to his defense, to Elvis's defense about the self-harm question. No, absolutely not. That couldn't have possibly happened. So they know that couldn't possibly happen, even though that narrative is already starting to be spread throughout the world. Let's see if there's anything left on this clip.
Gentlemen, will you sit down and split the mics, please?
Yeah.
And kind of speak up. Thank you.
And so I think what might be happening here is whoever put this clip together now, it's restarting from the beginning with perhaps a different camera angle or a slightly different camera footage.
Hey, as you look at the table, Dave Hebler is on.
Do you have a statement to make, or we just gonna ask you some questions? No, the reason that we are here is to, because we've seen some of the coverage on this, and we think that it's been entirely put in the wrong light by different individuals, and we'd like to see if somehow we can get it straight.
What is the straight?
So Sonny, who had an interview the day before, which is saying things that were different than some of the things he's saying right here, because the interview the day before certainly did center around the drugs, the one with Bob Greene from the Chicago Sun-Times that was sold around the world and that we saw in a newspaper from London. And yet here he is saying that he's heard some of this stuff that's out there now and he doesn't agree with it. And most of the stuff he doesn't agree with is Steve Dunleavy and Ronna Barrett, people who are selling the book that he's written. And John saying that he doesn't believe Elvis would self-harm. He loved his fans too much to do that, and he loved Lisa too much to do that. Yeah, absolutely. And there's just no indication of it in any way. It's like the drug overdose problem when they're asking the cops, and the cops keep saying, we never said that. We weren't looking for this. We don't know why everyone's reporting this other than that they made it up. And then Nancy's saying, Matt, didn't Sonny say in the interview that the guy who wrote the book, it wasn't supposed to be all about the drugs, that they were furious? Yeah, that's what he's saying. But the day before, he was given an interview and he didn't say that, or at least Bob didn't report that he said that.
The straight is that we love that man. That's what the straight is. And I'm telling you, no one could have been more shook up by that man dying than me. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. And we wrote this, we started in this a year ago.
Speak up, please.
Hello, Anna. Thank you for coming. I certainly appreciate that you're here to join us today. I love to have all of you guys here in the comments and to see you here and to interact with each other. I really love the Elvis community that's building here, and take this moment just to ask everybody that's listening to this broadcast, whether it's live or whether you're watching on the reruns, please give me a like, subscribe, share with somebody that you love, another Elvis fan who would love to hear these true Elvis stories, and comment as much as you can, because YouTube loves the interaction with the videos, and then they suggest the video to even more Elvis fans. And over the last couple of weeks, they've really kind of been helping me push the videos out finally, and I've gotten a lot of new viewers and new questions in, which I think really helps the channel. So thank you so much, guys, for everything that you do for me. And Terry saying, so if the three of them did the book, where was Red West, and why was he not at the interview? Could be he was not available or he's doing something else. Yeah, and I kind of mentioned this in another episode. I don't know where he's at, and I don't know what he's doing. Now, I've heard that he was so broken up that he couldn't get out of bed for a couple of days. And we haven't seen that reported yet. I'm sure that if we went out there and looked on the internet, we could find it for sure. But our friend Joyce doesn't have that available yet. So all we really know is that of the three guys that did this, Red's not there for some reason. Now, Red knew him the longest. Red was the closest to him, I believe. And they really, if any of them were brothers, it was read in Elvis. But for a guy who's as torn up as Sonny says that he is, and Dave's not really saying that he's torn up that much. They are holding it together pretty well here. Probably even better than Vernon was on his WHBQ broadcast.
We started into this a year ago, and there's been nothing added, anything different than what it was already. The book was already completed, and we didn't expect anything like him to do this, because otherwise it would have gone on, and whether he put a lawsuit against us or whatever he would have done.
But if you love the man, why do you drag all of this information out and make it fun?
Have you read the book?
I have not.
Okay. Wait till you read it.
I'm reading the synopsis.
Right.
So the reporter says, why did you drag all this personal information out into the public? Now, he doesn't say quite like in those words, but that's what the question is. Sonny, if you're his friend, why have you drug all this out into the public? And Sonny refuses to answer. His answer is, did you read the book? Well, you just told us that the book does not reflect what you believe. And then you told us that it did. And then you told us that it did. And you told us Steve Dunleavy took your words and twisted them. So this is the opportunity to say your words exactly as you want them heard, because nobody's editing this broadcast. There's too many people here. It's going to get out into the public. And yet he says, did you read the book? Because he cannot articulate why he did this. Even though these two knew that they were coming to this press conference, they did not take the time to prepare a statement for themselves as to why they did this, even though they had to have known that was going to be the number one question.
Well, read the book, please. I mean, you don't have to buy it. Just read it from someone or hear someone that's read it and find out that it's not the drug thing that's in there.
And then he says you don't have to buy the book to read it. Well, yeah, you kind of do. And they are going to publish it in the Star, like in pieces. So you don't necessarily have to buy the book to read it, but you got to buy something to read it or get somebody else to give it to you. There has to be a copy that's bought. So that's such a ridiculous statement for him to make. And the guy doesn't have the time to read the book, and he doesn't want to take the time because he doesn't really believe what Sonny's saying.
So sticks out. It's the things that we did crazy, the good times, the things we had, and how we felt that the drug things changed him into the person that he became. That's all. It's health and everything. But we did not specify that the drugs were the whole thing throughout.
I understand that. Why do you want?
So the drugs were the whole problem. They were what he became, but this whole thing wasn't about drugs. Again, Sonny has a very conflicting statement. This is why he did not write the book himself, because he does not formulate his thoughts in a manner that would be able to be written in a book like that. And neither does Dave, and neither does Red. That's why they had to bring in Steve. And Steve did formulate those thoughts, but they don't like the way that he formulated them, even though he used their words. And now Sonny's out here trying to combat that, but he has not prepared himself in any way. I kind of think that Sonny felt like he was somewhat equal to Elvis, and he'd seen Elvis do this with the reporters. He'd be able to walk out here and, talk to him the same way that Elvis did, and by the end, they'd be eaten out of his hands just like they did Elvis, but he's learning a very, very rough lesson here.
How to tell that side of Elvis?
Well, ever since I've known Elvis, this man has needed a challenge, and he's met it. He did it in 1973. When he is overweight, he was going to do a satellite show going into 25 countries, 1 billion people had never seen him perform before, and he knew it, and he went on a diet. He got down to about 165 pounds, the best I'd seen him look in several years, and he put on a dynamite show. And then he went right back to what he was doing before. He just didn't care. I don't know if he was getting bored. He loved performing, but the time in between.
So let's talk about this story for a minute. The fact that Elvis needed challenges. Now, I do agree with Sonny on that. Elvis was a very goal-oriented person. And you can kind of look at his life through a lens or a prism of what goals he was looking for at the time. And he did have a list of ever-shifting goals. But one of the major problems in his life was that he had 3 basic dreams when he graduated high school, the day he graduated high school. And the next day, he became a man, and he acted as a man, and he began to make his dreams come true. And his first dream was to care for his mother. And that's what he went to do that very first day. He went and filled out job applications to take not a job that he wanted, but any job that would be offered, so that he would be able to bring money home for his mother and take care of her. He changed in that moment from a boy who was bringing home money and giving it to the family to help support them to being a partner within the family. He was now an equal to them. As of that day, he was contributing as much, if not more, than what each of his parents were to the family budgets, and keeping them alive and keeping them roofed and keeping food in their bellies. He went and took that responsibility on immediately. That was one of his dreams. His second dream was to marry a woman like his mother. And he began to work on that dream much harder as of the moment that he graduated than he had before. He'd actually dated quite a bit in high school. People don't really understand that about Elvis. They think that he was very lonely and a shy kid, and that he was a recluse even when he was a child. It's not true. He dated quite a few girls. They thought he was very good looking, and he had charm and personality. So some of those stories are very fun, and maybe we'll get into those one of these days. But in the late, like December and early January, so December 1953, early January 1954, so Elvis has graduated in like June of 53. That's when he really meets Dixie Locke. Now, he'd already known her. They've been going to church, but she becomes the object of this dream number 2. And if he had not hit it big, there's every indication that he would have married Dixie and he would have achieved dream number 2, which was to marry a woman like his mother. And his third dream was his biggest dream and his most fanciful, and the one that he never thought would really come true, and that was to be an entertainer. And he wasn't necessarily thinking about singing. He was thinking about film acting a lot, but he was willing to do either one. He really enjoyed the singing, and he wanted to sing gospel. And so he began to work very hard to be part of a gospel group, and that's how he was going to achieve dream number 3. But he didn't do it just one way. He knew that Sam Phillips was in the area. He was very aware, and he worked things out so that he could maybe get in front of Sam. At the same time, he was going to record stores and educating himself about music, even though he wasn't necessarily purchasing the records. He was looking at them, reading the backs, listening to them in the booths, giving himself an education in the music industry. So he worked on all 3 of these dreams, and then by the time he was like 23 or 24, into the Army, he'd achieved them. By the time he went to the Army, he'd achieved everything he'd ever wanted to achieve. And then his mother was gone. And 2 of those dreams were all about his mother. And for them to be ripped away from him, this is what he struggles with for the rest of his life. And Sonny was there for that part of it, the part where he struggled with the loss of his mother till the end, as he tried to find the goals that would keep him going. So Sonny's right. He did need those goals, but the major goals of his life were accomplished, so he had to keep thinking up newer and bigger things, and sometimes the Colonel did that for him, like with this 73 special that Sonny's talking about. Now, Sonny's connecting the drugs to it and saying that directly after the Aloha special, and we'll hear this also from Linda Thompson. So any of you that are big Linda Thompson fans or have read her book, you know that directly after the concert, like they were supposed to go somewhere, I think the next day, and they all came into the hotel room and they went to the balcony, and Elvis was apparently high and could not go, and they saw this as him slipping back into his abuse of drugs is the way that they were stating it. But as we have seen, by looking at the prescriptions he was taking in 1977 and what those that's telling us about his medical conditions, it's very, very possible that some of the most severe medical conditions began when he was about 30, and they began to develop because the conditions he had didn't pop up overnight. They were very long, slow-term things, like an enlarged liver, an enlarged heart, a megacolon, the blockage of his arteries. That was all slow, but the pain increased with it all the time. So by 73, for him to have slimmed down to the size that he did and to go without the drugs for a period of time must have taken an immense amount of willpower, and the pain would have still been there. And I would estimate that pain to have been somewhere around, on a 5-point scale, with 1 being the lowest and 5 being the highest, around a 3, a 2 or 3 all the time, and upwards of a 4 during periods where you're really super uncomfortable, or maybe where you've overeaten. And my guess is he might have overeaten that night right after he got done with the concert, because he hadn't been able to eat for a while, and that was one of his favorite things. Now, I don't know that he did, but I believe that if he began to do the drugs right then, he was hurting, and he began to do them to relieve himself of the pain. And maybe by that point, he had to get high in order to get the pain to go away. So I'm not excusing anything that Elvis may or may not have done, but I don't think that the story that Sonny tells makes it clear if Elvis was or was not abusing drugs. There's a perception by those that were with him that he was abusing. But if you look at Sonny, he's a very healthy person. Now, he was also abusing drugs at one point. He freely admits that. Red admits it. Dave admits it. They were all participating in this lifestyle. Sonny appears to indicate that he stopped, and that he was able to stop, and he could stop at any time. Well, probably so, because he was doing it recreationally. So no matter how bad he got, it was recreational. Unless he was full-blown physically addicted to it. Now, Elvis, when he told them he needed the drugs, and they kept saying, you didn't need them when you were younger, well, that's true. He was in a massive amount of pain, and he needed the drugs in order to stop the pain. Sonny didn't have that pain. Sonny didn't understand. Red didn't have that pain. Red didn't understand. Elvis wasn't telling people about this pain that he had other than Dr. Nick. And even if he's telling Dr. Nick, they're not able to find anything. Like, they send the liver biopsy off to the liver guy, and he says, oh, there's nothing wrong with you, lose some weight. Well, I don't think Elvis wants to reveal to Sonny and Red and Dave that, you know what, I'm just fat. That's really the problem, right? So we are getting some comments over here. And John's saying that Sonny is lying about the whole thing. He said it was about the drugs, and to quote Sonny, maybe we'll do some good for him in the drug culture. And Terry's agreeing with me. And Nancy's saying, do you think Elvis kept that to himself, that from Sonny and Red, about the biopsy of his liver because it was so painful? So I think they must have known that he had the biopsy. But I don't know if they understood how painful it was to get the biopsy, or that this was not an eccentricity of Elvis's. I think it'd be easy to look and go, oh, well, he's got hypochondriac at this point, saying anything in order to get these drugs, and he even got a liver biopsy done to do it. I could see people saying that. So I don't know. I believe they had to have known, but I don't know if they understood the implications. The reason that we understand the implications is that I was able to go and ask a really smart artificial intelligence unit about where I could find information about what this might be like. Now, these guys wouldn't have had any of that information available to them. What they had was Dr. Nick. So if they asked Dr. Nick about it, he wouldn't have known either, because he wasn't the liver specialist, and his thinking would have been, oh, the liver guy said that everything was fine, so there's nothing wrong there. And I don't know that he understood how painful it was, right? I don't know that he'd ever had a liver biopsy. So it's just not clear to me that, these guys struggled with the same struggle, but theirs was very different from Elvis's. So we can't put everybody into the same boat. It might have been very easy for them to quit, but Elvis, maybe he really did need the drugs. And he said that. And I think we have to take him at his word that he wasn't just an addict because he was accomplishing these amazing things like the 73 Aloha special, and then right after that he's getting high. But that's not like a lot of the drug stars we saw in the 80s, that they would go out onto the stage all blasted and unable to perform, unable to live anymore. That's not what the case was here. So maybe it's like a high functioning alcoholic, but I think that he really needed the drugs, or at least convinced himself he did. And then John saying the guys say Elvis and the guys were supposed to see the Pearl Harbor Memorial, and Linda opened the door and Elvis was out the balcony with a towel wrapped around his neck. Right. That's the story I'm talking about, John. Exactly. So thank you for putting that in the comments. And Nancy saying, yeah, because I was wondering if they thought he was a hypochondriac. That is true because Sonny's not mentioning anything about his health. Yeah, I don't know that they thought he was a hypochondriac. I'm just saying that I could see how you might believe that, or you might convince yourself he was, because, and these guys, they believed he was doing a lot of stuff purposely to get drugs. And there's a lot of stories about different ways that they went and acquired drugs. So I think he's kind of referring to that and thinking these are the actions of an addict. But I think from 1970 on that you and I could look at it from what we know about the pain that he was probably in and think maybe he's less an addict and he's more experimenting to find what will actually take the pain away. And nothing's working, and he can't depend on these doctors because they are unable to diagnose this. But let's go back and listen to what Sonny has to say.
Between all the time that he wasn't on that stage for that hour, I guess the man was just bored and he was trying to find different things to do. He would get toys or things, grown-up things like three-wheelers, and ride them around Memphis just for an hour or so, just to get out. I mean, the man was limited. He could be in the middle of the crowd and he could be lonely. He was one of the loneliest men I've ever seen in my life. And we tried to be with him and protect him and keep him happy as the best we could. I swear to God we did, man.
Sonny, you said you didn't understand why he did what he did. What do you mean by that?
That seems telling to me right there, that he says that they tried to keep him as happy as they possibly did, and he swears that they did, which indicates to me that they did something that made him very, very unhappy. And that was the cause of this split between them.
On what part?
You were saying, I just don't understand why he did it. I don't know what you meant by that. Did what?
Why he did the drugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess because he was bored. He was bored. And unless he was on stage.
So Sonny's saying that Elvis did drugs because he was bored. So Sonny's not willing to give Elvis any of the benefit of the doubt that he actually feels pain. And I think this is the attitude of everyone that was around Elvis, up to and including Dr. Nick. Right? Like Dr. Ghanem from Las Vegas, he probably didn't really believe Elvis was in pain either. Elvis is known to have this pharmaceutical book to look at all these definitions about different pharmaceuticals and to try to move his way through a bunch of these different pills. So this is just part of one of his eccentricities, like when he collects police badges. So they're not really, and maybe Elvis fostered that so that nobody would know how much pain he was in, because when he began to admit to himself how much pain he's in, well, then he might have to admit that there's really a problem that needs to be taken care of. And as we looked at, it's not even clear that any problem could have been taken care of, even if they could have diagnosed it. So his body is slowly deteriorating on him, and it's not directly because of the drugs. And he's trying to combat that, but there's a lot of pain, and some of his daily habits, like overeating, are causing them to be worse. And then John saying that the guy sounds bitter. I mean, they have a right to be upset, but then bringing stuff into public only made things worse. Right. They have overreacted to a point that this can't be just about getting terminated. It just can't possibly be. This is just too extreme. But let's hear him out.
The man didn't have anything to do.
What drugs are we talking? Was he hooked?
We're talking about uppers and downers. We're talking about sleeping pills. We're talking about things like Demerol. We're talking, yes.
You actually...
And there we go. Now, sleeping pills, are they really getting you high? Now, I did read once that they talked about Elvis would like to take them till he reached like a twilight zone, and he would be kind of zoned out in a certain spot, and then, which was probably a relaxing spot to be. And if you took enough of these, you probably figured out right where that spot was, and maybe he did like it. But eventually, it would put him to sleep. And the whole idea here is that Elvis was chronically sleep deprived throughout his entire life, and that had to have made his health problems worse. It just had to have. So it seems, and Sonny would have known that he had such problems sleeping, and so it seems very unfair for him to attack Elvis about the sleeping pills. Now, the uppers, okay, maybe that's different, but that's what Sonny admits himself that he was using, that he liked to use the uppers. And then he says in one interview that he didn't like what they did to him anymore. He didn't like the taste that they put in your mouth, but that's because he used them a lot. He knew what they did, and he gotten to be a connoisseur about the effects. So again, it seems unfair to me to attack Elvis for the very thing that you yourself were doing, and now you've happened to quit, or maybe you quit, we don't even know, but now you're saying that, hey, it's bad for other people to do this. It's kind of hypocritical, and it's not clear that that's actually what's happening, because Sonny's not being honest within this interview about whether he was or was not part of this drug culture with Elvis.
We saw him take...
Yes. Yes.
Was he a constant user of drugs? Is what you're talking about?
He would get on and off of them. I mean, it was, he would get on them, I guess, like I said, out of the boredom, and then he would, when he knew he had something to do and he had to be straight, he would go ahead and clear himself out of it for a while and just take the sleeping pills to go to sleep and not get totally out of it. Like after an engagement in Vegas, the first couple of days he would stay there, boy. After not being able to do anything except take sleeping pills and his uppers and things, he would just, for the first 2 days, just get totally wiped out on Demerol and things and just sit there and not even be able to open his eyes. Just
Sonny, over a period of how many years was he involved?
So now there's been a question about Demerol, which, again, my memory's so terrible here, but I believe that was a pain medication, a high-level pain medication. And what Sonny's saying is Elvis would come and do the shows in Vegas, and after the first couple of days, he'd do so much Demerol that he was out of it. Well, why is he doing Demerol after the first couple of days or during the first couple of days of these? Well, he's suddenly begun to do these shows again, which were incredibly physically taxing on him, and he was already in pain. And now, much like the overeating, he's doing an activity which is probably making everything worse. And if you think about his enlarged heart, which wasn't pumping correctly to start with, now it's causing his liver to become more enlarged because it's not pumping correctly. And it's causing his megacolon to be worse. And it's messing with his digestion. And he's not getting enough blood in the first place because he's got this growing blockage. So we don't know exactly when all of that started, but by 73, 74, I'm sure it was there. So he had to have had, this pain probably when he began performing, after he'd been away at home for a while. And Sonny's like, well, he'd just be so out of it during those first couple of days. So Sonny's not connecting his use of these drugs in any way to the pain that we know Elvis must have had. Nancy's also saying that Well, John's saying that Sonny's kind of bashing Elvis in this interview, maybe trying to hide it. And Nancy's saying, I do not know. Sometimes I even take a low dose sleeping pill or melatonin. I don't want to take no more of that to find out. I think about the twilight. And Nancy's also saying, I will admit this on a pain pill moons ago. Instead of taking one, I took two, and I felt really good. And I stopped taking them because I didn't like that. I felt too good. Yeah. And if you felt bad all the time and you took those two pills and you're like, hey, I feel good. And then next time you need to take some pills, you take two pills again and you're like, oh, hey, I feel good again. You would quickly understand that you're going to get this feeling every time you do this. Now your tolerance is going to grow, but you can get this feeling if you take enough of these pills, and that takes you out of the pain, or at least to a point where you can ignore the pain and move on with your life and probably overeat again, because now you're not in pain and now you can do what you want to do. And of course, that particular choice is making things worse. So you have this terrible, terrible cycle that's going on. And Jen is saying that, agreeing with Nancy, that when people are in pain, if something's working to relieve that pain, who wouldn't? And I think that's what we hear Sonny describing here.
Well, he told us that a sergeant started him on Benzedrine or Dexedrine or something in the Army when he was on maneuvers out in the snow and everything. The sergeant said he didn't want the guys falling asleep, getting frostbite or frozen to death. He gave them, and this wasn't Army policy, it was just this sergeant had got them. And Elvis started using them then. When he came back, and I started for him in 1960, he was working out in karate. He had started, learning this art over there, and he was very enthused. And I started working out with him, and he was showing me, using me as what you call a dummy, where I would throw the punch, and he would show the counteracting moves. And we started coming out here on the movies, and we started taking the diet pills with him because he was, at the time, it was just diet pills, and then he would take sleeping pills to counteract and go to sleep, and we did the same thing. We were out on locations. We were playing football in 100-degree weather out here at Caneo on Flaming Star, and the director, no one knew how we did it. It was because of the uppers.
Well, based on what you know, then.
So now Sonny has said he was doing the same thing. When Elvis started all this, he was doing the same thing. Now he talks about the guy in the Army that gave Elvis these pills, and then says that wasn't Army policy, so he didn't get them from the Army. Well, where did the guy get these pills? Well, probably at the PX. Because they weren't illegal. They were a legal over-the-counter medication that you would just buy. There's stuff that's called no-dose today that you can get. It was just like that. You bought a bottle of these pills, or a few of them packaged separately. They were real popular in the gas stations in the 50s with truck drivers. And they were popular with women who wanted to lose weight, were often prescribed by doctors, but that prescription would be for a heavier dose than you can normally get from a gas station or a drugstore off the shelf. So this guy that gave them to Elvis and the rest of his crew, he was thinking, hey, this is a miracle drug that came out of World War II, just like all the other miracle drugs that came out of World War II. And there were a lot of them, and some of them fought illnesses, and some of them fought diseases, and some of them just kept you awake, like this one, and seemed to be a miracle. And there wasn't really an understanding that there would be long-term effects from this.
Do you believe that he died of natural causes, or do you believe that he died of a drug overdose?
I don't know, because I think one might contribute to the other. I think that I'm not a doctor. I don't know what drugs do to your body, but I would think that over a period of time, that if you took enough drugs, down drugs, regardless what he did with them, as long as he took them and kept taking them over that period of time, I would think that the body would start deteriorating. I would think that the heart wouldn't be used to the up and down that it would be underneath the pressure from cocaine or from uppers, and then back to a real low beat. I don't know. I think
Cocaine too?
Yes.
Sonny, when
There were reports.
So thank goodness they asked Sonny a medical question, and he said, I don't really know, I couldn't possibly know, and then he went ahead and answered it anyway.
That not only was he pretty heavily into cocaine and quaaludes, but that he also was on some of the even harder stuff, the good hard drugs, heroin, for example. Did he ever do that?
I swear to God,
The good hard drugs like heroin.
I never saw him take any heroin. Never. I think it might have frightened him. He felt manipulating. That's how he got into the downers, because in the movies he noticed himself up on the screen talking so fast that he felt that he needed to counteract it and slow down, because he would say, I can't even understand that Southern guy up there talking about himself. And he started experimenting with things to get him up and things to keep him there instead of taking him on up as high as the diet pill would, because I think that he was inhibited by cameras. He could get in front of a live audience and, man, everything came out of him. But I just think the impersonality of a camera and the way it stares at you, and I felt that he felt really shy, because he was basically shy, and I think that he felt basically shy in front of the camera so much that he started giving these to give him confidence, because I've taken diet pills and they give you confidence.
Did he ever have illegal supplies of drugs, or were they all prescription drugs?
No, the only ones I knew of were prescription, but in such amounts. He had so many doctors.
Cocaine?
So the first reporter asked, did he do heroin? And Sonny gives a long answer that he didn't do heroin. And then the next guy says, well, did he get illegal drugs? It's the same question, right? But now Sonny, foolishly begins to talk about the number of doctors that he had. Well, that's not helping anything, Sonny. If you had just stuck with the fact that he hadn't done any illegal drugs, it would have been fine. But Sonny wants to open up this whole can of worms now about these multiple doctors, which is true. So, I can't fault Sonny for stating truth out here, but he has been manipulated by the reporters and fallen right into it by a series of the same question asked twice. This is a very simple tactic that Elvis would not have fallen for.
Well, the cocaine didn't come from the doctors. It came from people that got it to him that weren't associated with him in the capacity of a doctor. And there's an incident in the book relating to that.
And now he's bringing up cocaine.
About how my cousin Red charged in to stop it one time. I think he broke the guy's toe or something going through the door and told him that he was going to break him up if he didn't quit getting the stuff to him. And Elvis heard about it, and meantime they had been mixing BX powder, or whatever you call it, with the stuff and grading it down.
So this is very interesting, because I'm sure we've all heard the story about Red stopping the guy and breaking his foot and saying don't bring drugs anymore, but I don't know that I've ever seen the story connected directly to cocaine in the printed stuff that I've read. So that, of course, I can't remember every detail, so I can't swear to that. But right here, Sonny is directly connecting that story to a delivery of cocaine, which is very interesting.
And it wasn't doing anything for him. And then he asked the guys about the stuff, and they finally admitted that they were scared and had been frightened by Red. And he called Red and Joe into a bedroom at a hotel on tour, and he told them that there would be no more bullying tactics, no scaring tactics, because these guys were scared of him, and that they discussed it for a while. And then finally he looked at Red and said, I'll never forget it, he said, I need him, man. I need it. And Red said, if you need it, then I won't ever do anything else about it. And that was the last attempt that Red had made from then on to stop things getting to him. We used to take things that came to him and break them down and change them. Change what was.
So that's interesting, too. That was the last time that Red tried to stop anything. So I'm not sure if that's indicating Red had stopped previous packages, or if it was just the one time that he did it and then he didn't try again. But that doesn't quite jive with the other stories that we've heard, or what Sonny's saying right now, that they would try to dilute this stuff or whatever he's trying to push forward right now. There's only a couple of minutes of this left, so I do want to push all the way through today, even though we're past our hour. John is saying, or not John, but Terry is saying in the comments, but what has any of this got to do with them? If Elvis took prescribed drugs, that should be private between Elvis and his doctor. They did not realize the damage they did to Elvis and his family. Yeah, I agree with that. And Nancy and Jen have been talking about how he needed to perform and therefore he needed the drugs to be able to perform. And I think there's a lot to that you can't go out there in total pain and pull off a really great show. You've got to be able to focus on the show, and your body's got to be able to respond. And I've had plenty of times where I've hurt myself in a way, pulled a muscle or whatever, and then I'm not able to respond, or I've done work the day before, and then the next day I'm so achy that I can't trust my legs or my arms or whatever. And I'm sure Elvis, had those same issues as he got older. And, his circulatory system didn't work right. And that had to really, really cut into his lifestyle or the way that he felt, because your blood moving around is everything. And if your heart is compromised, then everything is compromised. And then John saying Elvis only had one doctor, and that was Dr. Nick. He did have a tooth doctor, but that's not the same as a real doctor. So if you go back to the episode where we looked at the prescriptions, you will see that Dr. Ghanem, who was the Las Vegas doctor, so Elvis was using Dr. Ghanem, not super regularly, but whenever he was in Las Vegas. And he did get a very terrible treatment from Ghanem that really messed him up. But there was another doctor in Palm Springs who was also filling prescriptions. And we didn't show any of the actual prescriptions from that doctor, but we did show a list of 3 of them that he had prescribed in 1977. So Elvis was getting things filled by other doctors, and some of that was necessity because Dr. Nick couldn't prescribe in every state in the United States. That's not the way the prescription system works, or the medical licenses. So it would have helped him a lot if he'd been able to coordinate with these other doctors, but it seems as if Elvis did all of the coordinating himself, and Dr. Nick swears that he wasn't aware of all the things that Elvis was taking. Now, Dr. Ghanem, he apparently was saving all these empty bottles, so he was aware of everything that everybody was taking, but he wasn't communicating with anybody. So there were more doctors, but it's not clear, especially not to Joyce yet, what role they played, if any, or if any of that connected to his death. From what we've seen so far, those prescriptions were all for stuff that would have been directly connected to his pain issues, and his sleep, his need for sleep, and then his opposite need to wake up when they needed him to, perform. Let's watch the last minute of this.
Then the pain pills and things that he took. See, this is why I say it was all prescription stuff that he would get, that I saw it, except for the cocaine.
Did the other doctors know? In other words, he had 3 or 4 doctors who would be maybe giving him the same prescription. One doctor wouldn't know.
Different cities and not knowing it. Yes, sir, that is very possible.
The person who put the book together, Dunleavy, he said, I don't know if you've been pleased with the...
Only being out when he was a week and a half, 2 weeks at a time, just from the plane to the hotel, from the hotel to the building to do the show, and back to his hotel room, and locked in there till he left the next day. And when he couldn't stay up high, and he was just bored, and he would take these things to get him on stage and do it. And then he would take something to put him out so he could go to sleep, because he had to get up the next day and go to another city. But once he's on the stage, he's performing with everything he's got. He loved it.
Dave, how do you feel about all this?
Dave, are you in agreement? Yeah. Yeah. Did you see all this yourself?
I'd like to respond to it in a couple of ways. Number one, I'm a little bit distressed about the total emphasis on drugs and that particular aspect of our life, Elvis's life, because it really...
So Dave said that particular emphasis on our life. And then he said Elvis's life, but he's admitting right there that, yes, this was part of his life. He did these things with Elvis. Whatever it is he's accusing Elvis of, he was part of it.
It wasn't, just that. There were a number of things. We lived with the man, We loved him, we cared for him, and I think it was reciprocal. The book very clearly, I think, demonstrates that we had nothing but total respect for the man. We wanted more than anything else to see him as he was in his prime, on the stage, just knocking him dead, you know?
So that was the end of that interview, or that press conference. Although I think that might have been the beginning, and then we actually saw the end, because of the way they had edited this together. But I think we heard a lot of conflicting statements in there. I think it's clear that Sonny and Dave were not clear about why they did this. That Red's probably not clear about it either. That they've made a decision in anger, and they allowed that anger to carry them very, very far forward. And now they are reaping consequences that they are unhappy with. And they tried to come out here and combat the narratives that they themselves started into the press, that they were hoping that they would be able to cash in on. But now that has actually connected to Elvis's death. It was one thing when they were just poking fun at the man while he was alive. But now they've gone so far that they understand people are going to remember this forever. And that whatever they are remembered for is this final treachery that they have committed in public, because even the press sees that when they ask, why did you bring this private stuff out into the public? Why would any friend do that? That's basically what they got asked. Sonny was not able to answer it. And Nancy's saying that she loves the TV and that she wish she had kept that one. So I'm guessing you're telling us that you used to have one like this. I'm glad you like it. I try to keep everything era specific. This was a 1977 model. You could buy this TV in the stores in 1977. So it's possible Elvis might have even bought this one, but probably not, because it's a Sharp. And Elvis was very connected to RCA. But that is really everything for today. We are over time, but I did want to finish out that clip. In our next episode, we will be looking at the rest of the newspaper article that goes with this, and that's when we will learn how much Red and Sonny and Dave made from this little venture, and we will be able to, I've done the numbers so that we'll be able to look at it in today's money, and we'll be able to make a decision. Was this worth it, or was this 40 pieces of silver? And you guys will be able to make the call on your own. And Nancy's saying that she knows Dave said it broke up in marriage, and I think his kids were tortured in school, so I'm not sure what else happened. I don't think they reaped good things from this. And when you see the money and the deal, they really should have learned something from Elvis while they were with him. But and Anna's saying goodbye to everybody. So I am signing off, and I'm telling everybody that until I see you again, and we in our next episode, you all keep taking care of business.